Dreamit Ventures has been investing in great early-stage startups for over a decade. The Dreamit Dose allows us to share best practices to help even more founders. Tell us about your great startup using the links below. Welcome to the Dreamit Dose. I'm Steve Barsh, managing partner of Dreamit. In today's episode, we have a very special remote guest, a good friend of mine, Ben Glenn, who's an IP strategist and patent attorney and so much more at a great law firm in Silicon Valley, Shea Glenn. He also has a great content series called A Matter of Innovation. Ben, tell us more.
Steve, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on this Dreamit Dose. So what I want to look at today, I've broken this down into 5 habits. I call it the 5 habits of perpetual innovation. And the reason it is that way is because if you do these 5 things, it'll usually keep you out of trouble. Most of these are from train wrecks that I've experienced in my practice since being in the Valley since 1995. So here they are. We'll just hit them off real quick. So communication, this is when you're going to talk, when you're going to listen, and what you're going to say to people. The second one is self-knowledge. I look at that as the family tree, knowing who you are, who you're not, and how your company fits into a larger ecosystem. The third one is storytelling. Once you're really clear about communication and you know where you fit in, you need to have a compelling story. Next, the fourth one is zero in. There are many, many details that are going to happen as your innovation unfolds. Those details are going to matter. It's very important that you and your team can zero in on what's most important. And lastly, the fifth one is you have to act accordingly. Your dynamic is going to change as the company grows and matures. It's going to change depending on the situation you're in or who you're interacting with. So it's very, very important. I call that's situational awareness. We look at things like that, from watching people look at what the SEALs and how they train. A lot of things I did in the military. Just that situational awareness. What's going on around me? What's the most appropriate way for me to behave? So those are the 5 habits, Steve.
So Ben, you talk about 5 habits, and the first one that you talk about is communication. So what do startups and founders get wrong? What do you mean by communications and where are the mistakes?
Sure. I think about the 3 questions there. Who are you? What are you saying? And who are you saying it to? So that who are you? And that's not like a song from The Who. What I mean is you are in relationship with someone else. Unless you're just by yourself, you're out there and it's white paper, you're just getting started, you're a single entrepreneur, you have no obligations to anyone. But if you set that off to the side, almost everybody belongs somewhere. You're working at a job. Does the idea you come up with belong to your employer? You're in a research lab at a big university. Is it your idea? Or do you have an obligation to that university? Or maybe you're a student at a university. You got to understand that. If your technology licensing department has a policy, you got to know what that policy is. So that's that important piece of before you even say anything, you got to really understand those relationships so that who you are is really about relationship. So your relationship to others and whether or not someone else has any rights to your intellectual property, then you got to sort that out first. Because the general rule, everybody who inventors own their IP. They own their inventions, unless they have an obligation to give it to someone else. So that's who you are is really about relationships. Got to get that right.
Okay. And I guess the who, you can even think about there's different audiences, right? Maybe I'm in a university. Maybe I'm talking and you'll get, maybe you're going to get into this. I don't know. Maybe it's, are you talking to an investor? Are you talking to a potential customer? Are you talking to someone that might be your co-founder? And the way that you talk to them, the way you communicate could be very different given who they are. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, Steve, you've got it. You've hit it straight on. That's the second 2 of the questions. What are you going to say and why are you saying it? I love this. I always kind of riff on I don't know how many people remember this movie, but Wall Street and Gordon Gekko, he has that great line, information is the most valuable commodity. And I've tripped on this. I'll tell you what, Steve, these are not all mistakes that other people have made. Maybe there's a patent attorney I know that made this mistake. But I remember talking to an investor, a buddy of mine, but, it was one of the guys that down at Stanford and just sort of in the local community here in the Valley. And we were talking. I thought, oh, he's a great guy. I should get his opinion on this. And I tell you what, I'm playing out the line, and I just got to give him enough context, right? Turns out this guy was an investor in a company that ended up being a competitor. So here I am I was really saying too much whenever now I know, and this is actually the advice that I give people, before you start saying anything to a potential investor, make sure that he's not already invested in your arch rival or the person you're going to, I'm going to go in there. We're going to clean, big Whamadyne Industries. We're going to clean their clock. And he's like the founding member of Whamadyne Industries. He may not be too happy, but he's going to be happy to know what your plan is, but he probably is not going to write you the check. So that's where you got to get those in there. So that's where who are you talking to and why are you talking to them? I think most of the time you want to say enough to get to the next conversation. And that's really all you want to try to do in that initial, hi, I'm Ben. I've got a company working in this space. Is that an area that you invest in? That's just about all you need to say. Got it.
So that's in communications. We're communicating. There's who, there's what. Is there more?
Why? Why are you talking to them? Why are you talking to them? So that gets into the other one. Most of the time we're kicking the can about, provisional patent applications. So why are you talking to the patent office? Well, it can really save your bacon for one thing, because what you can end up doing is, you go off and you're very excited about a pitch contest, or you think you've got this investor that's going to really, this is the person that's really going to be there. You want to be able to tell them a lot about your company. But if you haven't protected yourself by giving that information first to the patent office, then you could really put yourself in a very awkward situation. Not only are you kind of spurring it, I think about this as you've thought a lot about an area, you've got this breakthrough, you've done this step from what I call ideation to translation to commercialization. You've already made that first step of ideation to translation, which is often the hardest one. I've got this raw science. How do I make that a product? Well, you just gave it to somebody. Well, now if they've got more people, more resources, they can quick like a bunny run. They're off making that product, and you're sitting there going, I had a great conversation. I hope that they finance my company. Well, they've already run off with your idea. So you wouldn't have any recourse unless you could say, well, that's funny, because a month before I talked to you, I told the patent office all about my great idea. My ideation and my 1.0 for translation and what I imagine commercialization might be. I told that story to the patent office. That's why storytelling is the third habit. I want you to think about things all the way through. And if you do that, even if you're not 100% sure, it's better to do that. And then you can always change that later on. But you just want to cover yourself and make sure that it's like telephone, telegraph, tell a patent office. You tell the patent office first. That's probably the A1 communication error. And a lot of it, Steve, this is discipline. All these are just disciplines. I mean, I call them habits, but it's really the discipline of communication and knowing when to talk and when to be quiet. You were teasing me about my whiteboards, so yeah, of course I want everybody to see those, but yeah, if I was to know, Steve, I'm beaming to you from my ultra secret lab. All of my experiments, I'm just taking a break. I had a major breakthrough. It's all on the board. I can't wait to type it up. What an idiot! Don't you have a blanket at the house to throw over? So a lot of times, sometimes you have to do that. If you've got to have people, come into your office or come visit a manufacturing site or a fabrication facility. Yeah, there's no harm. And, hey, we can put you in this part. We can't put you in that part. Same thing. Communication doesn't always have to be verbal. It could be what you show. A lot of things on social media, you release a video, anything like that. All of that is communication. And you just begin to think holistically about what you're putting out there, who you're saying it, what do you expect in return. And I think that'll help you stay out of trouble.
So is there a litmus test? Is there a bright line? How do I know if I'm crossing a line where I'm over communicating to an investor, I'm over communicating to a possible co-founder or a university? Like, how do I know? Is there a simple test?
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to come with your experience. And that's why a lot of these, most of the stuff that I do on A Matter of Innovation is exercises and inviting people to I always tell them, I just need you to have an idea that you care about, that we can talk about, so that I can get you through all these steps. And that will help you understand, particularly as you look all the way out to the end, all the way out to commercialization. If you realize that there's a lot of trail left, you probably should say even less, because that's where I think you get into trouble, mostly because you're going to be a jazz musician. And by that, I mean, it's all going to be improv. You're going to be making stuff up and trying to close the gap, especially with investors. Very, very dangerous, because all of a sudden you've set an expectation that you know more about what you're going to do, when in reality, you haven't even figured all that out. So I think it's the earlier you are, the less you should say. until you really, so you almost want to, it's like a teeter-totter, right? I really want to have a strong commitment from the other side before I say much more, which means you've got a term sheet or you're further along to where this person is really, just about to come in and you're in due diligence and there's a certain amount of protections in that. That's when you can really, I call it, you can open the kimono, you can run around the campground naked. But until that time, you need to be very careful about, maybe a little bit of shoulder, but nothing more than that.
So Ben, when we talk about all of this, one of the things you keep talking about is, when you're talking to an investor, and be careful when you're disclosing. And one of the challenges a lot of startups and founders have is many investors will not sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. And the startup is like, I want you to sign an NDA before I start talking about this. Look, sometimes in biotechs, they do sign NDAs and CDAs, but where we work in software companies, they don't. So how do you get comfort that an investor, they're not going to sign an NDA? So what does a startup do?
Yeah, well, Steve, it's very funny you mentioned that, because that is probably one of the biggest factors that has me put communications at the top of the list, because it is that discipline. And that's why it's 3 simple questions. So even you're nervous, you're getting to go in, you're driving down Sand Hill Road, your blinkers on, you're about to turn into Kleiner Perkins. And the last thing I want going through your head, who are you? What are you going to say? And why? And if you're going in and you're meeting with all the partners, it's probably a pretty good time to, both barrels, a reload, every round of ammunition you have. But if it's, you're not turning into Kleiner Perkins, you're pulling up at the Pete's over on Embarcadero. Sorry about the reference. I haven't been out of the house. So I'm just like all my favorite haunts, right? If you've got your blinker on and you're turning into the Pete's and it's an informal, you're having coffee with, one of the associates there, or, you've got a friend of a friend that plays golf with somebody who cleans the club, who gasses up the car of this investor, you need to be having the discipline to ladle out what you're willing to say to get to the next meeting. And if the person starts pumping you for information, you're just going to have the courage to say, you know what, at this stage, I'm just not comfortable telling you more about it. So I think that's the trick, is you really looking at that relationship. What do you need to communicate to deepen that relationship? Or more importantly, get to that go, no go. You want a litmus test for this go, no go. Is this somebody that I should invest the next meeting in? Or is this someone that put these guys on a slow burner? And that happens too. So you really have to get to know them. That's why communication is the first one. Relationships, and what do you need to be able to say to them?
Ben, that was wonderful. It's great to talk to you about IP and patents, both the strategy and the tactics. By the way, that was just one of the 5 habits Ben's going to be covering. Make sure to catch them all. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. We have a lot more coming. Thanks for watching.
I'd like today to introduce you to Ben Glenn. Ben's a great friend. Let's try that again.
Steve's just doing the intro over and over. It's so fun to watch. Steve, it's great to be with you. I've been looking forward to saying the same word.